The bullet that grazed Diana Turner's shoulder in the saloon brawl 5 years ago left more than just a scar. And preacher Elijah Whitmore made sure everyone in Columbus, New Mexico, knew exactly what she had become in the aftermath. He stood at his pulpit every Sunday morning in 1878, his voice thundering through the small wooden church about the fallen women who frequented establishments of sin. And though he never spoke her name directly, every soul in that dusty border town knew precisely who inspired his most venomous sermons about damaged goods unfit for respectable society. Deanna stood behind the counter of her modest dry goods store on a scorching August afternoon, arranging bolts of calico fabric with practiced hands that no longer trembled the way they once did. The bell above her door chimed, and she glanced up to see a stranger walking in with the confident gait of a man who had spent more time in a saddle than any parlor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bleached hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of a summer sky just before dusk. Dust covered his boots and the lower half of his denim pants, and he carried himself with an easy grace that made her heart skip in a way she had forgotten was possible. "Afternoon, madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal those striking features more clearly. "Name's Benjamin Grant. I'm looking for supplies. Just hired on at the Rockingham Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Deanna nodded, forcing her hands to remain steady as she smoothed her simple cotton dress. "Welcome to Columbus, Mr. Grant. What do you need? Coffee, flour, sugar, dried beans if you have them. Some tobacco and rolling papers. Maybe some soap that doesn't smell like lie and regret." His smile was genuine, reaching all the way to those blue eyes, and Deanna felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. She gathered his items methodically, aware of his gaze following her movements around the small store. When she reached for the coffee tin on the higher shelf, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the puckered scar tissue that wound around her upper arm and disappeared beneath the fabric. She quickly adjusted the material, but not before she caught the flicker of curiosity in his expression. "That'll be $4.30, Deanna said quietly, tallying the items on her small notepad. Benjamin counted out the money carefully, his calloused fingers placing each coin on the wooden counter. "This is a nice establishment you've got here. Everything well organized and clean. Beats the general store in the last town I worked, which smelled like old onions and despair." Despite herself, Deanna felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. "I do my best to maintain standards, Mr. Grant. Benjamin, please, or Ben if that suits you better." He collected his purchases, loading them into the canvas bag he had brought. "Mind if I ask your name, Deanna Turner?" She watched his face carefully for any sign of recognition, any indication that someone had already whispered the stories about her, but his expression remained open and friendly. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Turner. I expect I'll be seeing you regularly for supplies. The Rockingham keeps its hands pretty busy, and we go through coffee like water during roundup season." After he left, Deanna stood at her window watching him load his supplies onto a sturdy bay horse tied outside. He swung into the saddle with the fluid motion of someone who had been riding since childhood, and for just a moment, he glanced back at the store. Their eyes met through the glass, and he tipped his hat before riding off down the dusty Main Street. That evening, as Deanna locked up her store and walked the 3 blocks to her small rented house at the edge of town, she passed the church where Preacher Whitmore was standing on the steps talking to Mayor Patterson and his wife. The conversation stopped abruptly when Deanna approached, and she felt the weight of their stares like physical things pressing against her back. "Miss Turner," the preacher said, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "I trust you'll be joining us for services this Sunday. Your immortal soul could benefit from salvation." Deanna kept her eyes forward, her spine straight. "Good evening, preacher." "Such a shame," she heard Mrs. Patterson whisper as she passed. "Once a decent girl from what I understand. But after what happened at that saloon, well, damaged goods can never be made whole again." The words followed Deanna home like shadows, but she had long ago learned to build walls around her heart. What happened 5 years ago was not her fault, no matter what the good Christian people of Columbus believed. She had been working as a server in the saloon, one of the few jobs available to a young woman alone in a harsh territory, trying to save enough money to buy her own business. The brawl that broke out between two drunk cowboys had been sudden and violent, and she had been caught in the crossfire when one man drew his pistol. The bullet meant for his rival had torn through her shoulder instead, and the recovery had been long and painful. But that was not what made her damaged goods in the eyes of people like Preacher Whitmore. It was what came after, the fevered delirium, and the morphine the traveling doctor had given her for the pain. She had developed a dependence that took 2 years to break, 2 years of shaking hands and cold sweats and desperate cravings that made her feel like she was dying from the inside out. She had fought her way back to sobriety through sheer will, but the rumors and judgment followed her like a curse. 3 days later, Benjamin Grant returned to her store, this time with a list written in neat handwriting on a scrap of paper. "The foreman asked me to pick up supplies for the whole crew," he explained, handing her the list. "Looks like I'll be making regular trips into town." Deanna read through the list carefully, calculating quantities in her head. "This will take me about 20 minutes to gather everything. Would you like to wait or come back?" "I'll wait if that's all right with you. Not in any particular hurry, and I could use a break from the dust and heat." He leaned against the counter, watching her work with open interest. "How long have you owned this store?" 2 years, Deanna answered, climbing the ladder to reach the higher shelves. "Saved for 5 years before that to buy it." "That's impressive." "Most folks around here seem to just drift from one thing to another, never really settling. Takes dedication to build something of your own." Diana descended the ladder with several tins balanced carefully. "I believe in working for what you want, Mr. Grant. Nothing in this life comes free." "Benjamin," he corrected gently. "And you're absolutely right about that. I've worked ranches from Texas to Montana, saved every penny I could. Eventually want to have my own spread, but that's still a few years off, I expect." They fell into an easy conversation as Deanna gathered his supplies. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, how his parents had died of influenza when he was 17, leaving him and his younger sister alone. He had worked odd jobs to support them both until she married a good man 3 years ago, and then he had headed west to chase his own dreams. "What about you?" Benjamin asked. "You from Columbus originally?" Deanna's hand stilled for just a moment. "No, I came here 6 years ago from Kansas. My parents died when I was young, and I was raised by my grandmother until she passed. Decided to head west and make a new start." She did not mention the saloon, the shooting, the dark years that followed. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things were better left buried in the past where they belonged. Over the following weeks, Benjamin found reasons to come into town more often than strictly necessary. Sometimes he needed supplies. Other times he claimed he was just passing through and thought he would stop by to say hello. Deanna found herself looking forward to his visits, to the easy way he smiled and the respectful manner in which he treated her. He never pressed her with invasive questions, never looked at her with the mixture of pity and disdain she saw in so many other eyes. On a particularly hot afternoon in early September, Benjamin arrived at the store carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something," he said, looking almost bashful. Diana wiped her hands on her apron, curiosity overcoming her usual caution. "You didn't need to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." He handed her the package, and when she unwrapped it, she found a beautiful leather-bound journal with blank pages, the kind used for keeping accounts or writing letters. "Benjamin, this is too much," she protested, though her fingers traced the smooth leather with obvious appreciation. "No, it isn't. You mentioned last week that you were running out of pages in your ledger, and I saw this at the trading post in Deeming when I rode over there with the foreman." "Thought of you." His ears reddened slightly. "I hope that's not too forward." Deanna looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but genuine kindness in his expression. "Thank you, it's perfect." "Deanna," he said, her name soft in his mouth. "Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? There's that little restaurant near the hotel, or if you'd prefer, I could bring a picnic. I just want to spend more time with you, if you're willing." Her heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. "Benjamin, there are things about me you should know, things that might change your mind." "I doubt that very much, but I'm willing to listen whenever you want to tell me." He reached across the counter, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "I know what I see when I look at you, Deanna. I see a strong woman who built something from nothing. I see kindness and intelligence. I see someone worth knowing better." Before Deanna could respond, the bell above the door chimed violently as Preacher Whitmore strode in, his face flushed and his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "Mr. Grant," he said sharply, "I feel it is my Christian duty to warn you about the woman you're conversing with so familiarly." Benjamin straightened slowly, his entire demeanor shifting from relaxed to alert. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Preacher. Nevertheless, you shall have it. Miss Turner is not the respectable businesswoman she appears to be. She spent years enslaved to the demon morphine, a common addict who sold her very soul for the next dose. She frequented saloons and Lord knows what other establishments of vice. She is damaged goods, Mr. Grant, unfit for the company of decent Christian folk." The silence that followed was deafening. Deanna felt her face burn with humiliation, her carefully constructed walls crumbling around her. She could not bear to look at Benjamin, could not stand to see the disgust that must surely be replacing that earlier kindness. "Get out." Benjamin's voice was low and dangerous, each word precisely articulated. Preacher Whitmore blinked. "Excuse me. I said get out of this store. Right now." Benjamin took a step forward, and despite being a man of God, the preacher took an involuntary step backward. "You come in here spewing poison about a woman you know nothing about, casting judgment like you're the Almighty Himself. Well, I've got news for you, preacher. The God I was raised to believe in taught love and forgiveness, not this venomous hatred you're peddling. I am trying to save your soul from temptation," Whitmore sputtered. "My soul is just fine, thank you. But yours might need some examining if you think it's your place to shame a woman who survived something terrible and came out the other side stronger. Now get out before I lose my temper and do something we'll both regret." The preacher fled, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Benjamin turned back to Deanna, who stood frozen behind the counter, tears streaming down her face. "Deanna," he said softly, moving around the counter to stand beside her. "Look at me, please." She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "Everything he said is true. I was shot 5 years ago during a saloon brawl. The doctor gave me morphine for the pain and I became dependent on it. For 2 years I was barely human, doing anything I could to get the next dose. I lied. I stole from people who tried to help me. I lost everything I had. By the time I finally got clean, I was living in a shack at the edge of town with nothing but the clothes on my back and a reputation that will follow me to my grave. And then what happened? Benjamin asked quietly. Deanna wiped her eyes roughly. I worked. Any job I could find. I cleaned houses, I took in laundry, I worked in the fields during harvest season. I saved every penny for 3 years until I had enough to rent this building and stock it with basic supplies. I built this business from nothing, and I've been sober for 5 years. But none of that matters to people like the preacher. To them, I'll always be damaged goods. Benjamin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand in his. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Don't, Deanna whispered. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I see a woman who went through hell and fought her way back. I see someone who faced an addiction that destroys most people and conquered it through sheer determination. I see a survivor, Deanna. I see someone who refused to give up even when the whole world turned against her. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You're not damaged goods. You're perfect just the way you are right now. Deanna finally looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or pity. She found neither. What she saw instead was respect, admiration, and something else that made her breath catch in her throat. You mean that, she said, not quite a question. Every word. Your past doesn't define you, Deanna. What defines you is what you did with it. You could have given up, could have let the morphine or the shame destroy you. But you didn't. You fought back and built a good life for yourself. That takes more strength than most people have. He squeezed her hand gently. So yes, I would still very much like to take you to dinner if you'll have me. Deanna felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it existed. Yes, she said, her voice trembling. I would like that very much. They had dinner at the small restaurant that Saturday evening, sitting at a corner table away from the curious stares and whispered conversations. Benjamin told her stories about his adventures working ranches across the West, and Deanna found herself laughing in a way she had not laughed in years. He walked her home afterward, the night air cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, and when they reached her front porch, he took both her hands in his. Thank you for trusting me with your story, he said. I know that couldn't have been easy. Thank you for not running away after you heard it. Deanna looked down at their joined hands. Most men would have. Then most men are fools. Benjamin lifted one hand to cup her cheek gently. May I kiss you, Deanna? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Yes. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was tender and sweet and full of promise. Deanna melted into him, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I should probably go, Benjamin murmured, though he made no move to step away. But I'll be back Tuesday when I come into town for supplies. Maybe we could take that picnic I mentioned. I would like that, Deanna agreed, reluctant to let him go. Over the following months, Benjamin courted Deanna with a patience and devotion that slowly dismantled every defense she had built around her heart. He brought her wildflowers picked from the rangeland and books he thought she might enjoy. He helped her repair the leaking roof on her store without being asked, and sat with her in the evenings on her porch swing, talking about everything and nothing. The town watched their courtship with a mixture of fascination and disapproval. Preacher Whitmore railed against them from his pulpit, calling Benjamin a fool led astray by temptation, and Deanna a Jezebel corrupting a good man. But Benjamin paid the gossip no mind, and his steadfast support gave Deanna courage she had never known she possessed. One evening in late October, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Benjamin turned to her with an expression of unusual seriousness. I need to tell you something, he said. The foreman at the Rockingham is retiring next spring, and the owner offered me the position. It comes with a house on the ranch property and a substantial increase in pay. Deanna felt her stomach drop. That's wonderful, Benjamin. You've worked so hard for an opportunity like this. I turned it down. She stared at him in shock. What? Why would you do that? Because I don't want to live 10 miles outside of town away from you. He shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Deanna, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you hum when you're organizing shelves in your store and how you always save the burnt edge of the cornbread for yourself, because you know I don't like it. I love everything about you, and I don't want to spend my life without you in it. Tears spilled down Deanna's cheeks. Benjamin, I love you too, but you can't give up this opportunity for me. That's not fair to you. It wouldn't be fair to me to take it and lose you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I had a different plan for this, something more romantic, but I can't wait any longer. Deanna Turner, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you just how perfect you are? Deanna looked at the simple gold ring nestled in the box, then up at the man who had seen past her scars to the woman beneath. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Benjamin slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both dizzy. When they finally broke apart, Deanna pressed her forehead against his. But you're not turning down that job, she said firmly. We'll find a way to make it work. Maybe I could hire someone to help run the store a few days a week, and I could stay at the ranch with you sometimes. Or you could come into town on your days off. We'll figure it out together. Together, Benjamin agreed, kissing her again. I like the sound of that. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the courthouse. With the justice of the peace officiating and 2 ranch hands, Benjamin worked with serving as witnesses. Preacher Whitmore refused to perform the ceremony, declaring that he would not participate in such a mockery of holy matrimony. Diana had expected the rejection to hurt more than it did, but standing beside Benjamin and speaking her vows, she found she did not care what the preacher thought. The people of Columbus remained divided on the marriage. Some, particularly the older generation who attended church regularly, clucked their tongues and predicted disaster. But others, especially those who had watched Diana rebuild her life over the past 5 years, offered cautious congratulations and well wishes. The owner of the restaurant where they had their first date sent over a beautiful cake, and the elderly woman who ran the boarding house gave Deanna a quilt she had sewn herself. Benjamin accepted the foreman position, and they moved into the small but comfortable house on the Rockingham Ranch. Deanna hired a young widow named Sarah Brennan to manage the store 3 days a week, which allowed her to spend time at the ranch while still maintaining her business. The arrangement worked better than either of them had hoped. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Benjamin proved to be an excellent foreman, respected by the ranch hands and trusted by the owner. Diana's store continued to thrive, and she found herself gradually being accepted by more of the town's residents as Benjamin's wife, rather than being defined by her past. It was not universal acceptance, but it was progress. On a cold January evening, as they sat before the fireplace in their home, Deanna worked up the courage to share news she had been holding close for 2 weeks. Benjamin, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the harness he was mending, immediately attentive to the nervous tone in her voice. What is it? Are you all right? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The harness fell from Benjamin's hands as he stared at her in wonder. Pregnant. You're certain? As certain as I can be. The doctor in Deeming confirmed it yesterday when I rode over with Sarah. He says the baby should come sometime in early August. Benjamin crossed the room in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We're going to have a baby. Deanna, this is incredible." Later that night, as they lay in bed with Benjamin's hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach, Deanna voiced the fear that had been gnawing at her since she first suspected her condition. "What if I can't do this?" She whispered into the darkness. "What if the morphine damaged something inside me? What if I'm not strong enough?" Benjamin pulled her closer, his lips brushing against her temple. "You are the strongest person I know, Deanna Grant. You survived things that would have destroyed most people. If anyone can do this, it's you." He paused. "But you're not doing it alone. I'll be here every step of the way. What if people say terrible things about our child because of my past? Then we'll teach our child to hold their head high and ignore small-minded gossip, just like their mother does every day." His hand moved in gentle circles over her stomach. "This baby is going to be loved beyond measure, Deanna. That's all that matters." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, much to Deanna's relief and the doctor's mild surprise. By spring, her condition was obvious and the whispers started up again in town. Preacher Whitmore delivered a particularly vicious sermon about the sins of the fathers being visited upon the children, and Diana had to physically restrain Benjamin from confronting the man after church. "He's not worth it," she said firmly, her hands on his chest. "Let him say what he wants. We know the truth. The truth is that he's a bitter, hateful man hiding behind religion," Benjamin growled. "He has no right to speak about you or our child that way. No, he doesn't. But if you fight him, he wins. He gets to paint you as the violent cowboy corrupted by the fallen woman. I won't give him that satisfaction." Deanna stood on her toes to kiss his jaw. "I need you here with me, not in jail for assault." Benjamin wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her growing belly. "I just hate that he makes you feel like you have to defend yourself. You've done nothing wrong. I know, and you remind me of that every single day." She rested her head against his chest. "That's enough for me." Their son was born on a sweltering August afternoon in 1879, after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours and left Deanna exhausted but triumphant. Benjamin never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation in the first place. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry that rattled the windows, tears streamed down Benjamin's face. "He's perfect," the doctor said, placing the squirming infant on Deanna's chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a set of lungs that could wake the dead." Deanna looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt a love so intense it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," she whispered, touching his impossibly small hand. His fingers wrapped around hers instinctively, and she felt something inside her settle into place. "What should we name him?" Benjamin asked, his voice thick with emotion as he stroked the baby's head with one gentle finger. "I was thinking Thomas," Deanna said. "Thomas Benjamin Grant." "Thomas," Benjamin repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Tommy." They brought Thomas home 3 days later, and Diana threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she had applied to everything else in her life. The baby was healthy and strong, though he inherited his father's stubbornness and his mother's willful nature. Benjamin proved to be a devoted father, coming home every evening to hold his son and tell Deanna about his day while she nursed the baby. When Thomas was 3 months old, Deanna decided it was time to return to work at the store, at least part-time. She brought the baby with her, setting up a cradle behind the counter where she could keep an eye on him. The women of Columbus who stopped by to shop found themselves charmed by the cheerful infant, and gradually, Deanna noticed a shift in how they treated her. It was subtle at first, a smile here, a kind word there, but it was real. One afternoon, Mrs. Patterson came into the store, the same woman who had called Deanna damaged goods nearly 2 years ago. She approached the counter hesitantly, her eyes darting to where Thomas was sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "Miss Turner, I mean Mrs. Grant," she began, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize to you." Deanna looked up from her ledger in surprise. "Apologize?" "For the things I said about you and the judgments I made. I was wrong." Mrs. Patterson twisted her handkerchief in her hands. "I lost my sister to laudanum addiction 15 years ago. She couldn't fight her way back the way you did. I think I blamed you for her weakness, which wasn't fair. What you've accomplished, rebuilding your life and creating a family, it's remarkable. I'm sorry I couldn't see that before." Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That means more to me than you know. Call me Alina, please. And if you ever need anything for yourself or the baby, I hope you'll let me know." After Alina left, Diana picked up Thomas and held him close, breathing in his sweet baby scent. "Your mama has come a long way, little one," she whispered. "And we're going to make sure you grow up knowing that the past doesn't define us. What defines us is what we do with our future." The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch and helping his mother in the store. When he was 4 years old, Diana gave birth to a daughter they named Lily, and 2 years after that, another son they called James. The house on the Rockingham Ranch rang with children's laughter and the organized chaos of family life. Benjamin flourished in his role as foreman, and by 1885, he had saved enough money to purchase his own small ranch adjacent to the Rockingham. It was only 200 acres, but it was theirs, bought with their own sweat and sacrifice. They built a larger house with room for their growing family, and Diana expanded her business interests, investing in a freight company that transported goods between Columbus and Deeming. Preacher Whitmore never softened his stance toward Diana, continuing to preach his sermons about sin and redemption with pointed references that everyone understood. But his influence waned as the town grew and changed, bringing in new residents who had no knowledge of Diana's past and no reason to care. By the time Thomas turned 10, most people in Columbus knew Diana only as the successful businesswoman married to one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. On a warm spring evening in 1889, Diana stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Benjamin teach Thomas how to rope fence posts while Lily and James played in the yard with their dog. She was 34 years old now, and sometimes when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the broken young woman she had been 15 years ago. Benjamin caught her eye across the yard and smiled, that same warm, open smile that had stolen her heart in a dry goods store so many years ago. He said something to Thomas and then walked over to join her on the porch, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Everything. Nothing. How much my life has changed." Diana leaned into him, letting his solid presence anchor her. "Do you remember what you said to me the day Preacher Whitmore came into my store?" "I said several things that day, most of them not appropriate for polite company." Diana laughed. "You told me I wasn't damaged goods. You said I was perfect just the way I was right then." "I remember, and I meant every word." Benjamin turned her to face him, his hands resting on her hips. "Still do, though I'd argue you've only gotten more perfect over the years." "I don't think perfect is the right word. Scarred, maybe. Resilient, grateful." She reached up to cup his face. "Loved." Definitely loved, Benjamin agreed, leaning down to kiss her softly. Always loved. From the yard they heard Thomas call out, "Pa, I got it. I roped the post on the first try." Benjamin pulled back with a grin. Duty calls, but we're continuing this conversation later. Deanna watched him jog back to their children, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She had survived addiction, poverty, shame, and the crushing weight of other people's judgment. She had fought her way back from the brink of destruction and built a life that was more beautiful than anything she had dared to dream during those dark years. The scar on her shoulder still ached sometimes when the weather changed, and she still had nightmares occasionally about the desperate, hollow feeling of craving something that was slowly killing her. But those were just echoes of the past, unable to touch the solid reality of the present. She had a husband who loved her unconditionally, children who knew nothing of her history, except that their mother was strong, and a community that had slowly learned to see her for who she was rather than who she had been. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Deanna and Benjamin sat on their porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She rested her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and felt a peace that had once seemed impossible. "Benjamin," she said softly. Thank you for seeing me when no one else could. Thank you for believing I was worth fighting for." He kissed the top of her head. "Deanna, you've always been worth fighting for. I just got lucky enough to realize it first." He paused, his voice taking on a teasing tone. "Though I have to say, you've made me look very good. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of saint for marrying you, when the truth is I got the better end of the deal by far." Diana elbowed him gently in the ribs. "Flattery will get you nowhere, Mr. Grant. That's not what you said last night, Mrs. Grant." She felt her cheeks heat even as she laughed. "You're incorrigible. And you love me for it." "I do," Diana agreed, lifting her face for a kiss. "I really, really do." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all years do. Diana's store became one of the most successful businesses in Columbus, and she eventually opened a second location in Deeming. Benjamin's ranch prospered, growing from 200 acres to nearly 1,000 through careful management and smart investments. Their children grew strong and healthy, Thomas showing his father's skill with horses, Lily inheriting her mother's head for business, and James displaying a talent for music that surprised them all. In 1895, when Thomas was 16 and beginning to court the daughter of a neighboring rancher, he came to Diana with questions about her past. He had heard whispers at school, carefully repeated rumors about his mother's history that some of the older residents still clung to. Diana sat him down in the kitchen and told him everything, holding nothing back. She explained about the shooting, the morphine, the years of addiction and struggle. She watched his face carefully, prepared for disappointment or shame, but saw only thoughtful attention. "So Preacher Whitmore wasn't lying," Thomas said when she finished. "You really did all those things." "I did. I'm not proud of them, but I can't change the past. All I can do is live my life now in a way that honors the second chance I was given." Thomas was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he reached across the table and took his mother's hand. "Pa always told us that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. I think you're the strongest person I know, Ma." Diana felt tears spill down her cheeks as she squeezed her son's hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you'll ever know. Those kids at school who whisper about you, they're just jealous. Their mothers didn't build businesses from nothing. Their mothers didn't fight their way back from something that would have killed most people. You're not damaged goods, Ma. You're amazing." She pulled him into a fierce hug, this young man who looked so much like his father but had her stubborn determination. "When did you get so wise?" I learned from the best, Thomas said, hugging her back. By the turn of the century, Diana and Benjamin were established pillars of the Columbus community, despite the rocky start. Preacher Whitmore had retired years ago, replaced by a younger minister who preached a gospel of forgiveness and compassion rather than judgment and condemnation. Diana and Benjamin attended church regularly now, sitting in the middle pews with their children, and no one looked at them askance. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Benjamin surprised Diana with a trip to Santa Fe, their first real vacation without the children. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at expensive restaurants, and spent their days exploring the old city and their nights rediscovering each other in ways that made Diana blush and laugh in equal measure. On their last evening, they sat on the balcony of their hotel room watching the sun set over the mountains, and Benjamin pulled out a small velvet box similar to the one that had held her engagement ring all those years ago. "Benjamin Grant, if you bought me expensive jewelry when we're supposed to be saving for Lily's education, I'm going to be very cross with you," Diana said, though she could not hide her smile. "Open it," he urged, his eyes twinkling. Inside the box was a delicate gold locket engraved with their initials and wedding date. Diana opened it to find tiny photographs of their 3 children on one side and a miniature portrait of Benjamin on the other. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the locket with gentle fingers. "I wanted you to have something that represented everything we've built together, our family, our life, our love." Benjamin took the locket and fastened it around her neck. 20 years ago, I walked into a dry goods store looking for coffee and found the love of my life instead. Best decision I ever made was choosing to see you for who you really were instead of who everyone said you should be." Diana turned to face him, the locket resting warm against her skin. "You gave me something I never thought I'd have again. Hope. A future. A family. You loved me when I couldn't love myself, and you never once made me feel like I owed you for it. That's because you didn't owe me anything, Diana. Love isn't a debt to be repaid. It's a gift freely given." He cupped her face in his hands. "And you've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. You made me a husband, a father, a better man than I was before I met you. If anything, I'm the one in debt." "Then I guess we're even," Diana said, pulling him in for a kiss that tasted like wine and promises. They returned home to find their ranch running smoothly under Thomas's capable supervision, and Diana's store thriving under Sarah Brennan's management. Life continued its steady forward march, seasons changing and children growing until suddenly, Thomas was married with a baby of his own, making Diana and Benjamin grandparents at 45. The first time Diana held her grandson, a sturdy boy with Benjamin's blue eyes and Thomas's dark hair, she thought about how far she had come from that desperate young woman addicted to morphine and convinced her life was over. She had not just survived, she had built something magnificent from the ashes of her past. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" Lily asked, coming to sit beside her mother and peer at the baby in her arms. "I'm thinking about second chances," Diana said softly. "And about how the worst moments of our lives don't have to define us if we refuse to let them." "You're talking about the morphine," Lily said matter-of-factly. Unlike Thomas, who had been shocked when he learned about his mother's past, Lily had always seemed to take it in stride. "You know that's one of the reasons I want to be a nurse, right? I want to help people who are struggling the way you did." Diana looked at her daughter with pride. "You're going to be wonderful at it, sweetheart. You have a healing spirit." Benjamin appeared in the doorway, his hair now threaded with silver but his smile as bright as ever. "How's our grandson doing?" "Perfect," Diana said, because it was true. Everything was perfect, not because their lives had been easy or without struggle, but because they had faced every challenge together and come out stronger on the other side. That evening, after their children and grandchild had gone home and the house was quiet again, Diana and Benjamin took their customary places on the porch. 21 years of marriage had not dulled the pleasure of these quiet moments together, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Diana asked suddenly. "Marrying me instead of someone without all my baggage, your life would have been easier." Benjamin turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Diana Grant, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. Not one. Easy isn't always better, and I'd take our life with all its complications over an easy life with anyone else." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "You were never damaged goods, no matter what that fool preacher said. You were wounded, yes, struggling, absolutely, but you were never damaged because you never gave up. You never stopped fighting." "I almost did," Diana admitted quietly. "Before I got clean, there were days when I thought about just ending it all. The pain and the shame were too much. But you didn't. You chose to fight instead, and that choice brought you to me, brought us our children, our grandchildren, this beautiful life we've created." Benjamin squeezed her hand. "I know it wasn't easy. I know there were days when getting clean felt impossible, but you did it anyway, and that's what makes you extraordinary." Diana rested her head on his shoulder, watching the stars begin to emerge in the twilight sky. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. You believed in me when no one else did. I believed in what I saw with my own eyes, a strong, determined woman who refused to let her past destroy her future." He kissed her temple softly. "I just got to be part of that future, which makes me the luckiest man alive." They sat in comfortable silence as full darkness fell, the sounds of the ranch settling for the night around them. In the distance, they could hear the cattle lowing softly and the chorus of crickets that always accompanied summer evenings. It was a peaceful sound, the sound of home and safety and belonging. "Benjamin," Diana said after a while. "Yes, love. Thank you for calling me perfect when I felt like damaged goods. Thank you for seeing me the way you did, the way I desperately needed to be seen. You saved my life in more ways than one." Benjamin pulled her closer, his arm secure around her shoulders. "You saved yourself, Diana. I just had the privilege of standing beside you while you did it, and I'll keep standing beside you for the rest of our days, loving you exactly as you are, perfect, beautiful, mine." Diana lifted her face for a kiss, pouring 21 years of love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, their eyes bright with happy tears. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, more joys and sorrows as all lives do. But they would face them together, just as they had faced everything else. Diana's past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was Diana Grant, successful businesswoman, beloved wife, devoted mother, proud grandmother, and survivor. She was everything Preacher Whitmore said she could never be, and she had done it with grace, determination, and the unwavering support of a man who saw her true worth when no one else could. As they finally stood to go inside, Benjamin caught her hand one last time. "I love you, Diana. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," Diana replied, her heart full to bursting. "Always and forever." They walked into their home hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held together. Behind them, the stars shone bright over the New Mexico desert, bearing silent witness to a love that had conquered judgment, overcome addiction, and proved that damaged goods was nothing more than a label given by people too blind to see the truth. Diana Turner Grant was not damaged. She was whole, she was loved, and she was finally, completely, perfectly home.